Hello and welcome to The Green Room by Deloitte, an award-winning podcast where we explore the topics that matter most in business. I'm George Parrott, and this is episode number 55, where we ask, should leaders think more like activism?
Who goes around going, actually, I'm an activist, but actually, if you dig down a little bit underneath that, what's really driving, what you get up for every day?
So it's not just about kind of what message are you trying to sell, but it's also about the messenger.
Are we really saying all of this has nothing to do with business? If you're running a business, all of this is going to become relevant to you.
It's really about the actions that we take that also build that trust and that credibility.
Hello and thank you so much for tuning into this episode of The Green Room by Deloitte. We've had our launch episode for our brand new season 7, early in the week, and this is our first episode proper. And I'm absolutely thrilled, Skinny, to be joined by my co-host, Lizzie Elston. How are you, Lizzie?
It's good to be back on the green sofa, George, with you, and feeling really, really excited about this episode. Having done a bit of reading into it and research into it, it sort of has filled me with quite a lot of optimism, actually. And you'll find out more, obviously, from our guests about what we're going to get into. But suffice to say, there's a role for all of us to be playing in helping the world be a better place, given all the crises going on at the moment.
Yeah, we're talking about activism and leadership, and it's a sort of topic which we've sort of touched on in a few previous episodes. And all of our previous episodes are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and our website, which is deloitte.co.uk/Green Room Podcast. So please do check them out. Some of the episodes that we've covered before are, can businesses do good and make money at the same time, and can one person really make a difference? But I think this one is going to be a really good conversation just to sort of wrap all that stuff together, I think. So, but Lizzie, you've previewed that we've got some fantastic guests on the sofa with us today. So who have we got to talk us through this?
So I'm delighted to be joined this week, first of all, by John Miller. So John is a partner at Brunswick Group and the founder of Open for Business, a coalition of 40 global companies, including Deloitte, that campaign for LGBTQ+ rights across the globe. And he's also one of the authors of a book called The Activist Leader. Obviously very apt for today's conversation. Welcome, John.
Hey, hi, nice to be with you.
And also delighted to be joined by Laura Grautenbach. Laura is the Head of Sustainability Engagement for North and South Europe at Deloitte as part of our World Climate Team. She's also the co-lead of the LGBTQ+ Employee Resource Group for Deloitte Netherlands. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you very much.
Great. John and Laura, thanks so much for coming. I think to start with, it'd be really good to get your take on what do we mean when we're talking about activism? It's a bit of a loaded term sometimes. And John, you're probably best placed to kick this one off.
Yeah, it's a great question, because when you hear the word activist, of course, the first thing that springs to mind are the kind of placards and the banners and that attitude of just implacable, uncompromising, this is what has to happen. And of course, that's all an important part of it. But I guess what we've seen over the years, working with companies, it's 12 years now since Lucy and I set up the ESG and Sustainable Business Practice at Brunswick Group. Lucy's my co-author on the book. And one of the things we really started to notice is that activism, actually you also see it in business as well. And what you're often seeing when you see that in business is like people actually spotting an issue and going, that issue is relevant to us actually as a business. And they really focus in on it and go, that matters. We can't just leave this to somebody else to deal with. We have to be part of dealing with that, and then mobilizing behind, what does it take to actually, get the business behind that, to actually try and become part of a solution rather than businesses constantly being, part of the problems to a lot of the global challenges that we face. So that spirit of activism, really the way we would describe it, I think, is it's a kind of mindset. Rather than, either you're an activist or you're not an activist, either you're kind of making money in business or you're, out on the streets, trying to stop the traffic. It's actually more of a mindset of trying to understand what really matters and what can we do about it.
That's interesting. So yes, because when we were talking earlier about activism, and you can almost associate it with being angry, can't you, about something? And I suppose there's a difference between anger and being passionate about something or wanting to be part of the solution.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's more what this is, isn't it?
100%. I mean, we talk a lot about ambition, actually. So that's sort of channeling that energy into a sense of something needs to happen here. And maybe we can be part of making something happen here, but acting with that sense of an ambition to genuinely make an impact on the issue. And the really interesting thing about that is when you see people starting to behave like that in a business, two things happen. First of all, it becomes like there's a gravity that they create around them. Yeah, it's people are attracted to that. They want to be involved in that. It's very attractive. You know, people want to become part of that because there's a real clarity of purpose. And the second thing that happens is, I mean, these are tough issues, like complex, messy, intractable problems. It's not an easy ride, actually, being in a business trying to, you know, grapple with some of these issues. And having that sense of ambition and that spirit of activism about you, it gives you real staying power, real resilience, because it's going to go wrong. People are going to say no. You know, you're going to have to pick yourself up. But if you've got that clarity of purpose, that kind of ambition to make a genuine impact, you can kind of keep going.
Thanks, John. I love that clarity of purpose point, and that's something which is we're definitely going to ask you later. So spoiler alert on that one. But Laura, just over to you. How would you define activism, and what do you think's fueling activism in the business world?
Yeah, very interesting question, and definitely a lot of what John just said resonates with me. I wouldn't really classify myself as an activist, maybe really, but I guess a lot of the things that you just said I can really relate to. For me, activism is about, you know, standing up for what I think is right and really having those clear values and being visible within the organisation and driving that positive change, and maybe even hopefully inspiring other people to join me on that journey as well. So yeah, that's to me what activism within a corporate organisation means.
The lovely thing about hearing that answer, Laura, is we meet quite a lot of people in businesses who will tell us, but I'm not an activist. And of course, who goes around going, actually, I'm an activist, you know? But actually, if you dig down a little bit underneath that, what's really driving, you know, what you get up for every day, you know, why you're doing what you're doing, how you're managing to grab hold of what it is that your business is doing and applying it to some of those big societal issues. And when you say that, then people tend to go, oh, maybe I am a bit of an activist, actually.
And I guess partly the reason where people might question that is that the skeptics would suggest really businesses are there to make a profit, and what we're talking about here is something sort of around the edges. And so maybe it's something we'll also be getting onto a little bit later, but it is something I'm really interested in, is actually this is about the way in which you run a business, and it's not just about profit on one side and then some stuff around the edge.
100%. There are a lot of commercial imperatives driving this. This is about what matters to the business and to the world, not one or the other. But of course, it's like, you talk about activism and business, and the standard story is like activists attacking business, isn't it? Environmental activists, employee activists, shareholder activists. So your business leaders are like, don't talk to me about activism, you know. But we're trying to flip that story on its head. You know, what if it were the business leaders were the activists? Because, and we've had, you know, business leaders saying to us, you know, why wait? Why wait for the activists to come at you? Why not disrupt these issues yourself as a business leader?
And you alluded to it earlier, John, and it was interesting, Laura, you said you didn't identify as an activist, but you know, my day job, I'm in public relations, and activism does have a bit of a PR problem. It is a bit of a dirty phrase and a dirty word, and I think it was one of the CEOs in your book you quote, John, described himself as he's an activist but not a zealot. So how do leaders kind of get that initial sort of, you know, balancing act right, just to sort of get over the line and start learning from the activism cause?
Well, I think what it takes to be an activist, yes, you need that kind of sense of idealism and that clarity of purpose, but you also need huge practicality, you know, and business leaders have that in buckets. I mean, it's what it means to run a business. You know, it's like these businesses are big problem-solving machines, and you know what we're trying to get to is like, what if we can harness that problem-solving power of these businesses and get them to look at the big systemic issues that they're part of and do things a little bit differently? And when you have that kind of conversation with a business leader, it ceases to be a kind of dichotomy. Actually, it's a false dichotomy. You know, it's that activist mindset, as we call it, is what it takes to solve the problems that the business is facing and that the world is facing.
Yeah. And Laura, your task with trying to roll out Deloitte's, you know, very successful world climate program across, you know, dozens of countries over Europe. How can you influence leaders across those different geographies to that effect?
Yeah, and I think that there are maybe more activist leaders within our organisation than maybe they might even realise themselves. While you were talking, I was thinking about our own Chief Sustainability Officer and the way in which she really drives our programme, basically, drives our sustainability transformation, but not by indeed going to the streets with the big signs or even sharing all the scary stats with the executive board. But yes, sharing that urgency, but also being able to work the firm, work the politics, and build those relationships to drive change effectively.
And that's really interesting, your point about building the relationships, because no one can do this on their own, can they?
Exactly.
It's got to be a team effort, both within an organisation and presumably with external parties as well. Would that be?
Definitely. And what I'm seeing across this North and South Europe firm that we operate in is there's actually a lot of differences within different countries. So sometimes the best activists within a certain country are indeed the leaders. They are the CEOs. And when a CEO sends an email to the whole firm and says, listen, guys, we need to stop travelling by plane. We need to all take trains from now on because it's better for the environment. Okay, maybe that message will land in some countries. In other countries, there's many behavioural change principles like social norms that really say, okay, if your peers are doing it, then maybe they're more influential than the CEO sending an email. So it's not just about kind of what message are you trying to sell, but it's also about the messenger. And I think that's where the activism really comes in, at all levels, really, when you want to drive that change.
I think that at all levels is a really important part of it as well, because, I mean, what became clear quite quickly to us doing this kind of work was that there's more than one leader in a business, right? There's more, not just the CEO that's a leader in a business, there's leaders all through the business. And actually, in different geographies, in different sectors, and different, deep in the operations, deep in the R&D labs, people are playing a leading role. And so this thought about can business leaders become activists, for us is relevant wherever you are in a business. You don't just have to be at the top of a business. Another kind of fun thing that in the book people seem to enjoy is this idea of there are different kinds of leaders, and we've identified these different archetypes for what it means to be a leader. I don't know whether you've had a chance to.
There's 5 different leader types. You've got the fixer, the mobilizer, the campaigner, the pathfinder, and the bridge builder.
There's what did you figure out what kind you were?
I'm not. I'm gonna probably say I'm a mixture of all 5, I think. So
it's quite a help. Yes, indeed. I mean, it's quite a helpful way of just understanding what activism is, and breaking open this idea of this, placard wielding, militant. So, I mean, the fixer's a great one. You've got these people that just see something that needs fixing and mobilise this organisational resource around it. So we use as an example for that Jean-Henri Dunant, who founded the Red Cross. This year, a businessman going from A to B walked past a battlefield and was like, I can't just walk past this. I have to do something about this. Or the mobilisers very much like, what's around me I can make happen. And so, that example we give for that is Peter Benison, who's like founded Amnesty International. It's a great movement of letter writing, Or you've got, as you say, the campaigner. This is much more like the kind of Harvey Milks, the Martin Luther Kings, using their voice out there with their charisma campaigning, or the pathfinder. So people that are trying to reframe problems, trying to figure out, they don't take no, they're like, this can't be done, there isn't a way, they'll find a way, So example of that is Mohammed Yunus, who, found a way to get credit to the poorest people in society. Or we have the bridge builders, and these are people that manage to find a way to sort of bring people together and translate across paradigms and get a conversation going. I've often thought maybe podcast hosts have a bit of bridge builder
absolutely.
About them. Yeah. But it's a way really of just going, it's very easy to go, that doesn't apply to me. But actually we can all be activists wherever we are in a business, or whatever kind of personality type we are.
And that's what's so interesting, because some of the names you mentioned there are, Martin Luther King, how many CEOs would have the sort of opportunity to say, well, I lead my business in the way that Martin Luther King. I mean, it's a very different world. But having said that, businesses can take that mindset, can't they? And they can be inspired by those sorts of personalities. I mean, Laura, do you have any any sort of activist leaders that inspire you out in business?
Oof. Actually, funnily enough, many of the activists that immediately come to mind for me are more maybe the ones that I can relate to in terms of like the younger activists like Greta Thunberg and, you know, those kind of people. Vanessa Nakate, I think, is really great. I had the opportunity to see her at the One Young World Summit, which is like a convention of young leaders across the globe. And they were just absolutely inspiring. And just the way in which they were able to convene that message, I think definitely the campaigner type there was just so inspiring to hear. And even though it's a couple of years ago, I can still remember parts of that speech that, you know, haven't even been recorded. I was just there live and I can still recall some parts of their speech. You know, that's how impactful they were to me.
So I'll be trying to get Greta and Vanessa on the podcast as well. So if you are listening, please do respond to our many emails. But I think it's I think it's a really interesting position there. And I suppose to a certain extent, just flipping it on its head a bit, you know, why should a business leader get involved in some of these societal problems? You know, what's the purpose for that? They've got other things on their to-do list, surely, which are more important.
Yeah. I think especially the was it the bridge builder, the final one that you just mentioned? I think especially that as a concept is really relevant for, well, Deloitte as a whole. You know, we have clients in all the different industries, and we are able to, well, orchestrate that systemic change, if you want, in, for example, the food sector or in the energy sector. And I think, so I'm not sure if these profiles are only for people or could also be for businesses, but that's how I could really see Deloitte kind of making a change by building those bridges between different companies, basically, that wouldn't otherwise talk to each other, to come to a solution that we can only create when we work together and listen to each other.
I think this is now at the top of the to-do list. There's a lot on business leaders' to-do list for sure. This is now on businesses to do this. You know, I mean, they need to figure out how are we engaging with a next generation of consumer. How are we engaging with the next generation of employees? How are we managing to maintain our regulatory license to operate? How are we ensuring, strengthening our supply chains, ensuring, systemic resilience of our business, let alone, finding out how do we unlock innovation and open up new markets. There are really strong commercial imperatives for a business to tackle this stuff. We're often asked, what's the business case for this? To which we're tempted to reply, will show me the business case for not doing this. Because, I mean, if you take a step back for a second, what are we actually talking about here? I mean, we're look at the headlines in the last, month or so. We've had the hottest day on Earth ever, the hottest June ever, the hottest July ever, the highest ocean temperatures ever. We've had the lowest levels of sea ice ever. 25 countries currently are experiencing severe water shortage. 50% of the world's population lives in countries that experiences severe water shortages at least once a month. And then if you talk about the S issues, in this country, in the US, half of all people that are in poverty are in working families. Now, are we really saying all of this has nothing to do with business? If you're running a business, all of this is going to become relevant to you. And the thing is, business leaders do know this. Right? This isn't news. What the challenge is, how do we respond? What are we supposed to do about this? That's the tough question. There's a big part of the mindset shift that's needed, actually, is what's been asked of business leaders historically, almost a bit like being the captain of a ship, right? So, great, set course, did we get there? Now business leaders are being asked to think of their business in the context of the whole system that they're a part of. And running a business is also about transforming those systems. Now, that's a big shift. It's actually hard to overstate what a radical shift that is in what it takes to lead a business.
It's so interesting you said that. I was going to ask about, these are hugely complex problems, some of these huge societal and climate issues and things like that. And you can have the most activist leader in the world, super woke, wants to do everything, wants to be one of these superhero mindset people. But, there are going to be other leaders who just aren't bothered or aren't engaged in the issue at all. And how does a leader sort of navigate some of these hurdles? I'm just thinking if you're the CEO of an airline company and you want sustainable air fuel, but there's quite a lot of other leaders within that system. You have to try and get on side. But how do you navigate those blockages?
I mean, I think that's a challenge for sure. And this isn't in any sense to pretend that all business leaders are suddenly becoming activists, because if only that were true, then we might accelerate the change that needs to happen. But I think some of the leading companies and some of the most out there business leaders do definitely understand this, and for them it's not new. It's the examples that we're talking about in the book is like Microsoft and MasterCard and Coca-Cola. We talked about Maersk, the world's biggest shipping companies. I mean, these are established, successful companies with a long track record of delivering shareholder value, right? This isn't flaky new stuff. This is big companies deciding this really matters. Are there going to be people that are naysayers to that, or that don't, or want to push it back? Yes, absolutely. And of course, as we're seeing now, there are all sorts of political agendas that are hijacking this conversation as well. But the underlying drivers of this shift, are sadly clear for all of us to see. So I don't think this is going anywhere.
Yeah, and in addition to that, it's also the cost. What's the cost of not doing anything? And if they're used to creating shareholder value, there's also a cost of not being sustainable, and then also that decreases the shareholder value. So it could also always be part of the business case, I think.
And there are many issues out there, and there are many crises that we have to deal with today. And so what does a business need to do? Does a business need to be able to pivot towards all of these issues, or should an organisation and a leader choose one particular issue? How does someone decide where to focus?
It can seem quite overwhelming, can't it? I think, because business leaders are absolutely surrounded by people with agendas that seem really important and really urgent, and it's just not possible to focus on all of them. I think the thing to do is just to take a step back and go, which of these issues are we intrinsically a part of? By the systems that we're part of, through the kinds of operations, the kinds of materials that we're using, through the products and services that we're delivering to consumers. How are we intrinsically a part of these issues? Because that's the opportunity to make the most impact. And another way of asking the same question is like, where's the heat? I mean, it's not hiding. These problems aren't in hiding. They come knocking at your door very loudly, and they're the most contentious issues. They're probably the things you need to be looking at.
Did you know at Deloitte we buy goods and services from social enterprises, which contributes to our 5 Million Futures programme? From Babies with Love sells beautiful gifts for babies and gives the profits to orphaned and abandoned children around the world. Their ethically sourced designs help vulnerable children to grow up in safe, happy places. Do you know someone who's expecting? Why not treat them with a gift from babieswithlove.org?
So Laura, we're talking about how people can be more activists in their approach. What are some of the skills and traits that people could pick up from in terms of persuasion, which feels like that's an important part of the process?
I mean, it's a difficult question for me to answer, because I feel like as a person, I'm quite outgoing. I easily connect with people. So I feel like that's really helped me to build those relationships and be, well, more of an activist, if that's what you'd like to call it. I think it's about asking the right questions and listening to people just as much as it is, persuading or conveying a certain message. To really build those bridges and get other people to see your perspective as well, but also learn from others. I think that's how you'll grow as well. Yeah,
I think there's an element about having that kind of authentic passion for causes. I think, and I think we touched on that earlier. That seems to go a long way to be effective and convincing.
Definitely. And John talked about it from a business perspective and saying, don't just choose any cause, choose what is most relevant for you to pick. And I think the same goes for people as well. Don't just randomly pick a cause that you want to be an activist for, but pick something that's really close to your personal passion, so that you can also convey the message with authenticity. And I think if you're passionate about something, people are more likely to listen to you anyway.
And sometimes it feels like the call speaks to you. Doesn't it?
We've done lots of episodes before looking at sort of the purpose and business and that interaction. And I think that having a focus, it just the lesson from a lot of those episodes has been it really does bring people on board a bit, Laura. And I know as a firm we don't sell plastic goods or things like that, but we sell people. And so a lot of what Deloitte tries to do is try and make a positive impact in societal issues that affect people, whether that's gender or race or whatever. So I think that's quite an interesting way to sort of focus the attention. And would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what really excites me about my role as well. As I have the opportunity to lead people engagement for our sustainability transformation. And I think if you look a couple of years ago, people might think, okay, you've got a sustainability strategy, let's implement some new policies and then it all work out. And maybe, in a factory that might be a bit more the case than it is for us. But especially at Deloitte, it's all about people. It's about our culture. It's about our behaviours. If we have the ambition to halve our travel emission reductions per head, you can implement a new policy and you can get the data. But actually every single time someone needs to travel to a client or is asked to travel somewhere, it needs to be not just in the back of their minds, but they need to act differently every single time and choose the most sustainable option. And I think that's just really exciting, learning about what drives people, what motivates them, what are the different kind of nudges that we can implement to get people moving. And I think activism, in a sense, is a really important part of that. And whether it's leaders leading by example, whether it's people nudging peers and saying, you're not going to really take a flight from Rotterdam to London, right? You're going to take the train. Or whether it's, people identifying as a climate champion and really taking on that role. We've got 500 climate champions across the North and South Europe network right now. And each of them are responsible for driving these sustainable decisions within their teams. And just these activists, almost at all levels, are so incredibly crucial when you want to drive change within an organisation like Deloitte that's really driven by its people.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We got our Gen Z and Millennial survey sort of shows that I think over half of Gen Z workers want to work for an organisation that is kind of activist in certain issues. And but how do you get leaders to listen to those employees, Laura?
Multiple ways. A lot of leaders want to listen as well to the younger people. It's not just about younger people having to convince leaders. I was part of the Young Deloitte board already like 4 years ago or something. And we were actually invited by the executive board on a regular basis to talk about the strategy, and they wanted the diverse perspectives on the strategy of Deloitte the Netherlands at the time, just so they could improve it. They knew that the people who were currently in the board roles wasn't the most diverse group at the time, so why would they be deciding on the strategy of the company, especially if the younger people would be moving up the ranks really, really soon. So I think it's a willingness of the leaders, obviously, but also employee activism and all the stats that you just shared just help build that business case, definitely.
I think it's always quite helpful to hear of examples. And I just wonder if there are any other stories that you might want to share about inspiring big businesses and what they're doing.
I think one of the things that really excites us when we were writing the book is companies that we've worked with that have faced some big issues, but instead of shutting down the hatches and trying to be defensive about those issues, have actually stepped out and gone, we call it the pivot, actually turned towards the issues and gone, well, maybe we're a part of these issues, and what can we do to help, actually? And so you take an example like Standard Chartered Bank, one of the significant global bank, had all sorts of issues around the risk of money laundering in its own systems, in its own operations, but took action around that, completely overhauled their internal systems, did a huge culture program inside the organization, actually became probably the world's leading expert on the risk of financial crime in the financial system. And so instead of actually just going, well, we've got it all sorted, that's fine, They then went, well, we understand how this system works and how to spot these risks. Maybe we can be part of tackling financial crime in the financial system. And so set out a big program of activity, working with the other banks, working with law enforcement agencies, that's had real impact, has really shifted the needle on things like financial crime around human trafficking and financial flows around organised crime. This is businesses stepping out of their own four walls and figuring out how are we part of these systems, and what role can we play because of who we are and because of what we do. What role can we play in the solutions?
So we've talked quite a lot about the role that businesses play, being part of this ecosystem and being able to be part of the solution. But I guess that is often driven by what consumers want and what employees look for. And Laura, I wondered if you could talk a bit about Deloitte and what is it that the clients are looking for from us, first of all, and then secondly, what talent is looking for, what new employees are looking for, and why they might join an organisation.
Let me answer that question from my personal perspective, because obviously once upon a time I joined Deloitte as well. And I did consider, to be honest, like working for a non-profit organisation or working in other sectors where I thought I could really do some impactful work. What I noticed is there are lots of great organisations out there doing great work. But I think as Deloitte, we've really got the privilege, the scale, the resources, the influence we have at clients to really make a difference. We have, across the North and South Europe region, 75,000 very smart and capable people, each of them working at clients in different sectors. Like, we're really uniquely placed to make a difference. Let me give the example of our sustainable delivery clause that we have at the moment. So I think that's a very concrete example of our own ambition to become net zero and that of our clients. And we need to think not only about the type of client work that we do, but also how we deliver that work. And actually, our emissions to deliver client work are part of our own journey to net zero, but also part of our clients' Scope 3 emissions. So I think it's about joining forces and finding that kind of way how you could work together to tackle a common solution, which is why we've put sustainable delivery within our clause and why we're really looking to drive down emissions together with our clients.
How do leaders create that drumbeat or that sort of movement to rally the troops and get people on side?
I can share a personal example. For me, activism can even start with just being visible. So I hear a lot of leaders or people saying, I have nothing against this cause, or, I'm supportive, but they don't ever talk about it. So the first step might be is to just speak up for what you believe in. I was at a LGBT plus event a couple of weeks ago in Amsterdam during the Amsterdam Pride. And there was a trans woman in a panel, and she said, I don't need people to speak for me to solve some of these challenges. I want people to lift up my voice. And I think that's something that everyone can do, no matter at what level you are, is you don't need to feel like you're the expert of a certain topic or speak for specific minority groups, but it's about how do you create that space where those minority groups are lifted up and understood to create that empathy. So yeah, being visible, lifting up minority groups and voices, I think those are some of the characteristics. I can share another very personal example as well is I have a girlfriend, and I never thought that was something that I needed to necessarily throw into conversations at all. I just thought it was irrelevant. It's not that I wasn't confident to share it, but it's just like, I just have a partner, like it's fine. And I didn't realize until a female leader at our company talked about the wonderful weekend she had away with her wife and her kids, that I realized what an impact it made on me, and like I felt like understood and I could relate and things like that. And I was like, just something small like that, if that can have like an impact for me, and I could see a leader in that position being like me in a sense. I know maybe it sounds a bit weird, but now I really try to throw it into conversations, like this, just hopefully to be able to, well, maybe even inspire someone else who can benefit from this in the same way that I did at that time.
And Lara, that's really interesting you said that. We previously had an episode with Mag Scott, who heads up our Proud Network, and she recounted a similar story from when she was starting out at the firm, and how she was inspired by a leader with kind of that sort of similar message. And I think that's the fact that it's kind of coming around full circle again. It's really interesting. And John, we haven't really spoken about Open for Business that much, but presumably this is all positive stuff. It's the direction of travel that you're trying to achieve. And do you think we'll ever be in a world where coming out isn't going to be an issue and things like that, or are there?
Well, that's the hope, for sure. I mean, it's great hearing your stories, because in a way that's the work that Open for Business is trying to do. But Open for Business is a coalition of like 40 companies. So Deloitte has been a fantastic partner over the years for us. We also have people like Google and Virgin and Microsoft and MasterCard, and I think what we've been trying to do is really make clear that businesses in countries where LGBTQ+ rights are really challenged, businesses are supportive of LGBTQ+ rights, right? And that's all about the visibility that you're talking about. So recently we were doing some work in Uganda. You probably heard there was a extremely harsh anti-homosexuality law now passed in Uganda, and we put out a statement saying that this is not in the interests of business, this is not in the interests of economic growth in Uganda, and all supported by data. And that means the world to the activists in those countries, to see these big companies, these big global companies have got their back. I mean, sadly in Uganda, it might take a while for that to have an influence, but certainly it's sending a strong signal, because in Kenya, in Tanzania, this is a concerted global campaign by the Christian right from the US to put these anti-homosexuality laws in place. We're also working in Eastern Europe, across the Caribbean, in Southeast Asia. But it's exactly that logic that you described, Lara. It's about making visible that there are LGBTQ+ people in businesses, in successful businesses, and that businesses value that. It's important to them.
Yeah. And if I can add on to the visibility bit, because maybe this is a bit the flip side of activism. I'm not sure if we were going to get there as well in this conversation, but I'm just going to throw it in.
In activism.
Exactly. Is if you just talk about an issue and you don't back it with actions, and that's something that we've seen, taking that example of the Amsterdam Pride, where a lot of organizations join and there's always the PR and the media around, is this, they call it rainbow washing or pink washing. And I guess the same thing happens in sustainability, where they talk about greenwashing. It's one thing to stand up and be visible for the cause that you support, but it's also really crucial that you back it with actions. And that's why I was also a bit triggered by the name of this podcast, Should Leaders Think Like Activists? I think they should act more like activists and not just think like it, because I think it's really about the actions that we take that also build that trust and that credibility that you need to be successful.
So you're seeing this firsthand. Do you feel optimistic, given that what you're seeing, or do you sort of still think, golly, there's a heck of a long way to go?
I mean, to the 10-year question, I think hopefully we'll look back at 10 years' time and see all of this turbulence about should businesses engage with these kinds of issues as exactly that, as noise. And the fundamental drivers of business engagement are strong, and it's happening. It has to happen. It will happen. The question is, can it happen fast enough?
Yeah.
And that, I think, we'll see.
Yes. Yeah.
Laura, are you optimistic?
Absolutely. Yes.
Fantastic. But,
very short.
Well, Laura and John, it's been an absolutely fantastic conversation. I think we talk hours about this, and there's loads of questions I haven't asked. But thank you so much for coming and chatting to Lizzie and I today about this. I suppose we've got to end with the big question. And so in a nutshell, could you answer the question, should leaders think more like activists? Laura?
Yes, I think leaders should act more like activists.
We'll change that.
We have a sentence in the book which the publishers actually put in the blurb, right? It says most people feel powerless when they look at the problems facing the world. But if you're a leader in a big business, you're not powerless. And we found that a really inspiring thought, actually, and we know others do too, which is really why we wrote the book. So, I mean, wholeheartedly, the answer has to be yes.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Green Room by Deloitte. We'll be back next time with another big question. This podcast is produced by our very own pod squad and is hosted by George Parrott, Lizzie Elston, Ethan Worth and Annie Wong. Thanks to our creative studio for their technical support. Original music by Ali Barrett.